Hello everyone, my name is Randy Smith. I'm a former teacher here in Washington County, retired now. And the book I'm going to be reading from is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Brave New World was banned in a lot of places because of its political, social commentary and some of the things that accompanied that. In my mind, Huxley was just warning us what the dystopian world of our future could be. And now, about 80 years on since he wrote that book, some of it is coming to fruition. So this is Brave New World from Aldous Huxley. Mr. Foster was left in the decanting room. The DHC and his students stepped into the nearest lift and were carried to the 5th floor. Infant nurseries, neo-Pavlovian conditioning, announced the board. The director opened the door and they were in a large bare room, bright and sunny. Half a dozen nurses, trousered and jacketed in their uniforms, their hair aseptically hidden under white caps, were engaged in setting out bowls of roses in a long row across the floor. Big bowls, packed tight with blossoms, thousands of petals, silky, smooth, and ripe, like the cheeks of innumerable little cherubs. The nurses stiffened to attention as the DHC came in. "Set out the books," he said. In silence, the nurses obeyed his command, and between the rose bowls, the books were set out. A row of nursery quartos, inviting, a gaily colored image of beasts and fish and birds. "Now bring in the children." They hurried out of the room and returned in a minute or two with many 8-month-old babies, all exactly alike, a Bokanovsky group, it was evident, and since their caste was Delta, they were all dressed in green. "Put them on the floor." The infants were unloaded. "Turn them so they can see the flowers and the books." At once the babies turned silent, but then they began to crawl towards the clusters of colors, their shapes so gay and brilliant, and the white pages of the books. As they approached, the sun came out, a momentary eclipse behind the cloud. The roses flamed as if receiving a sudden passion from within. A new and profound significance seemed to infuse the shining pages of the books. From the crawling babies came squeals of excitement, gurgles, and twitterings of pleasure. "Excellent," the director said. The swiftest crawlers were already at their goal. Their small hands were reaching out, touching the illuminated pages of the books. The director waited until all of them were happily busy, and then said, "Watch carefully." He gave the signal. The head nurse, standing at a switchboard, pressed down on a little lever. There was a violent explosion, and shriller and ever shriller a siren shrieked. Alarm bells maddeningly sounded. The children started, they screamed, their faces distorted with terror. "And now," the director shouted, "we proceed to rub in the lesson with an electric shock." There was an uneasy silence. Several of the boys watching this blushed. They had not yet learned to draw the significant but very fine distinction between smut and pure science. One at last had the courage to raise a hand. "Human beings used to be viviparous. They bore their children naturally." "Quite right," the director nodded. "And then the babies were decanted." "Born," came the correction. "Well, then there were parents." The boy was overwhelmed with confusion. The smut that was really science fell with a crash into the boy's eye-avoiding silence. "Mother," he repeated loudly. "These are unpleasant facts, I know it, but there used to be mothers." While the child was asleep, a broadcast program from London suddenly started to come through, and the next morning, to the astonishment of his crash, little Reuben woke up repeating the words for a long lecture by that curious old writer, one of the few works that has been permitted to come down to us. The principle had been discovered, and many, many years were to elapse before the principle would outlive its usefulness.